And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Bal Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who, if he has an off switch, he hasn't found it yet. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing good, Kieran. It has been a long day. We finally have some news to talk about. I started this day in Texas, hanging out with family for the holidays. Was driving a rental car to the DFW airport when the news hit. So shout out to my girlfriend and some texting, getting the news confirmed. She's a better reporter than I am. And now we're back here in Michigan. Had some time to talk to Scott Harris, process the signing of Gleyber Torres, the newest Detroit Tiger.
Yeah, so basically this podcast that came out this morning that we did got out
All irrelevant now.
pretty quickly. So thanks Scott for that. But we don't look back, we look forward. So I'm sure everybody knows by now, Gleyber Torres is a Detroit Tiger. It's a 1-year deal for reported $15 million. There's some, other legal, not legal, but contractual mumbo jumbo in there with some finances, but it doesn't really matter. Also, it's a 1-year deal. Finances don't really matter all that much. Anyway, so the nice little trickle down on Tigers Twitter of a lot of speculation. It's like, all right, was he going to play third? I thought the Nationals tried to get him to play third. I guess I had thought about bringing him up several times in terms of free agent options, but I was like, oh, surely he's played some third base in his career. No, he literally has not logged an inning at third base as a major leaguer. I didn't go in depth about the minors, but as a major leaguer, he has not logged an inning at third base. So I just kind of cast that to the side. Silly me. So then Scott Harris does a little brief availability. Credit to him for doing that, and we get a more clear picture. He is going to be your 2025 second baseman. What does that mean for Colt Keith? Colt Keith is going to move to center field. No, I'm just kidding. Colt Keith is going to first base, which means that Spencer Torkelson is now on the outside looking in. So several layers to this move. There's so many different things we can kind of go to. I want to summarize it by this, kind of give the most important talking point at the top here, Cody. This is obviously going to be a shorter podcast as we try to get some of our takes out there. Gleyber Torres, in many ways, for this Tigers team, is a problem helper, but he is not a problem solver. All right, and we'll get into that a little bit more. He raises the floor of this team. He doesn't really do anything for the ceiling. And we have a new era or a new chapter of the Scott Harris era where he is signing these, it used to be these pitcher contracts, 1 year, double-digit millions of dollars, has a great track record with that in a short time, leading the Tigers. Now he does it for a position player for, I think you would say, real dollars, even though it is a 1-year deal. And there are some projections for Gleyber that he might get from somebody like 2 for 36 or something like that, maybe an opt-out in there. You sign him 1 for 15, it kind of feels like you got him for market value, and you got him at a time that he, just like those pitchers I talked about, Lorenzen and Flaherty, that he's trying to prove himself still. So he fills a couple needs. This is not a AL Central winning move by any stretch of the imagination, but it is one, as Scott Harris said, 12 times today, makes the Tigers better today. So that's my kind of surface level analysis there, Cody. What do you think?
Yeah, much like you and much like I did with Alex Cobb, I had not put a ton of thought into Gleyber Torres this offseason because I looked at him and I was like, no, he's a second baseman. They don't really need a second baseman. They have Colt Keith, and even though he's going to take grounders at first, we've talked about how the Tigers seem hell-bent on trying to make Colt Keith at second base work. And Colt, look, I just don't think it ever made sense long-term, but he did get better defensively. Oddly enough, I think you just downgraded your second base defense. And that's why I have very conflicting feelings about the Gleyber Torres signing. I think if you have to boil it down to one thing, you know what? He does make this team better. Just the presence of his bat in the lineup. So not here to pan it by any means. My initial reaction, thinking, oh, wow, they're going to get this guy to mostly play third base. Before I knew anything, before Scott had talked, really was not a fan of it because that would seem to kind of make it feel like the only move, right? Now we know there's a lot more, and it's already grown on me in the course of 6 hours. Torres, look, this guy's I really like his offensive profile. He's a good at bat, makes great swing decisions, doesn't chase, doesn't strike out a ton. Really consistent on base numbers, over 330 for the duration of his career. We just talked about that on our last episode. This is a guy that's going to get on base, give you a good at bat. I don't know if he'll ever hit 38 home runs again like he did in 2019, but that's a good profile. Now, the flip side of this is I worry fans are not going to take to Gleyber Torres because Yankee fans didn't necessarily, and part of that was the high expectations he set for himself by hitting 36 homers or 38 homers at age 22 and then never quite getting back to that level. But part of it, he's just a negative defender almost year in and year out. He's not a good defensive second baseman. He's one of the worst base runners in Major League Baseball. That runs pretty counter to what we've heard about how much the Tigers care about base running and winning on the margins now. He can be prone to just some mental lapses. There's a little bit of the Javi Baez frustration factor, even though he's a very different offensive player, his overall game, that's part of the package, and that does worry me. But we also talked about, like, the Tigers' words seem to indicate they don't like Spencer Torkelson. Their actions seem like, well, no, now we got an action. Spencer Torkelson is kind of on the ropes here. And unfortunately, I think that makes your team better too. You almost upgrade two positions at once overall, and then there's still the factor you can do something at third base. I'm going to try to only say the name Bregman once today because we're just all speculating about this. But there's room to do some more maneuvering on the roster, and highly interested to see how this picture will eventually come together.
So the key numbers to kind of look at are he is a career 330 on base guy. All right. And he's like 334, or he was 334 last year. So basically last year was kind of his average. I might have had those flipped. Regardless, last year was basically his career average as on base. And that would be third on the team among regulars returning from last season's Tigers team. So that right behind Riley Green and Garrett Carpenter. All right. So that's number one. So that's your righty on base guy as the roster is currently constructed. Okay. Number two is against the lefties. He's would be, based just on 2024 numbers, top 5 in pretty much every offensive category you would look at against lefties. And again, like, he's a guy, this is not like an Andy Ibanez type situation where like he's spot lefty hitting. You see what I'm saying? Whereas Torres, like, he's in the lineup every day. You mentioned in your article on The Athletic, you know, and said here, like, durable. He is a legitimate everyday player. So any at-bats against lefties, it's not like advantageous automatically that he's going in there, right? So I think that when you provide that context, it does make it sound a little bit better. And he has a ton, obviously playing for the Yankees, a ton of postseason experience. He's been in the playoffs every year, I believe, as a major leaguer, except for 2023 when the Yankees didn't make it, right? So I forget how many games he's had. I can look that up real quick, but he's got a, excuse me.
He has like 200 postseason at bats. 267
batting average in the postseason. So, like, again, we're talking about things that matter. We're not like I'm trying to like overhype like what this does, but these are real tangible benefits to this Tigers team. And I think you also have to give Scott Harris a little bit of credit for, number one, staying really true to how he wants to build this program in terms of getting guys at, I don't want to say bargain, but getting guys in advantageous situations. And then also not being stubborn, because again, the Torque thing could have been just an easy stubborn thing. We'll just kind of hope that it works out. No. He is pivoting off what is numbers wise something that has not worked out outside of basically one stat for 1 year, right? So like there's no just kind of gliding into the next season. This move dictates that, and then with Colt Keith again not being stubborn, just sign this guy to a long-term extension. Second year in the major leagues, you're already moving him to a less important offensive position. Arguably, that's sometimes up for debate, but certainly a less important offensive position. So I like it when teams kind of stay true to themselves, and this is a move that Scott Harris has made it about this Tigers organization, and Torres checks every single box. So for that, he deserves credit. However, this is not a game breaker by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting things Scott said today was that Gleyber had, multi-year offers from other teams, turned it down to play in Detroit. Obviously, that's like kind of a bet on yourself type thing. He's trying to rebuild his value to what it could be or what it could have been a couple of years ago. If you remember back in the day when people wanted to trade like Michael Fulmer for Gleyber Torres or whatever. So, that struck me as interesting. This is a guy who wants to be here, who obviously on the 1-year deal has a lot of incentive to have a big year. And he's walked into what's going to be a good opportunity to do that. We'll get to know the person a little bit, but some of the writers I've talked to in New York seem to really like him. Like, despite the frustrating nature of his game on the field, seems to be a really stand-up guy off the field. Hopefully will mix well with this clubhouse, provide a little bit of the veteran leadership factor. Like you said, a dude who has been there and done that and gets you a needed bat in this order. Obviously now there's so many questions, like what comes next? We don't know, but you can start to see a world where maybe you enter spring training feeling pretty good if there is another big move or two to come. What's next for Spencer Torkelson? That's a massive question. If I had to guess right now, Tork's not on this roster on opening day, which is actually kind of crazy to process.
Yeah, and Sky Harris, I say this respectfully, USOB, because he says like Gleyber's going to play second base, and then he's like Colt Keith is going to play first base, and then someone's like, so what about Tork? He's like, yeah, so Tork. It was kind of funny. It was kind of funny. I laughed at it, and he did the very professional things. I talked to Colt. Colt's fired up, wherever that's worth. I guess Colt was like, yeah, I guess I have to do as much running on the field. Cool, I'm down with that. And then Tork said like, I've been working hard this offseason, blah blah blah. All those cliche things, but now it's real. This was always in theory for Tork. Now it's really real that it's in his face of like his time with the Tigers in jeopardy. I don't want to say major league as a major leaguer, but his time with the Tigers is definitely in jeopardy. And we'll have a lot of time to dive into that deeper about what that means or whatever. But the J-Hen thing that we were talking about last week, like if we're trying to find a place for him, literally less than 24 hours later, we're talking about trying to find a place for Torkelson because as of now, value added is not in Torkelson's favor. And you have a president of baseball operations that didn't draft you, and now here, and you haven't performed. These are the kind of things that happen.
Suddenly the actions very much matched the words, right? When it seemed like the Tigers were out on doing anything at first base, turns out they got a first baseman by signing a second baseman.
And the team elevated beyond just having to wait. Like we've compared him to Andrew Vaughn before. Like if the Tigers were the White Sox of the past, handful of years, you would just be putting Tork out there every day and just kind of hoping. Hope time is like over, bro. Like it's over.
Yeah.
And to have like a Torres signing kind of facilitate that was not on my bingo board for the offseason. That's why we love the sport.
A reminder that the Tigers can get pretty creative. They've proven they're pretty good at it. And there could be more to come. The Torkelson thing, like Scott Harris supposedly told Spencer that, work hard, whatever. You're still a right-handed power bat. We need that. There could be a role. He also said the Tigers aren't going to experiment with him playing corner outfield or anything. He's still first base DH. That's a hard roster spot to win. Right-handed backup first baseman. Not a lot of demand. Go down the roster right now. Dinglers, Jake Rogers, Colt Keith, Gleyber Torres, Javi Baez, Trey Sweeney, Matt Vierling, Riley Green, Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter. We're at 10. You paid Ibanez and McKinstry. Winsel Perez, switch hitter, plays multiple positions. I mean, we're looking at Perez, Malloy, Jace Young, Spencer Torkelson, potentially all fighting for one spot. And Tork is the most limited of those players, both positionally. And right now, Young is more the shiny new toy. J-Hen shown some good things at the plate, is now playing multiple positions. Winsell, we know kind of what he can do. It's going to be a tough path to a roster spot for one Spencer Torkelson.
Yeah, for a team like the Tigers, headed by Scott Harris, managed by an AJ Hinch, the lack of ability to do multiple things is just and not even be able to do one thing great. That's a not for long spot for you. That's just that's now we actually see it. Now, like I said, we've talked about stakes being real. This is a stakes being real move. So there's going to be more for us to talk about here moving forward, but we wanted to get a quick podcast out there to get our thoughts out. Like I said, sum it up real quick. Upgrade, raise floor, doesn't do anything for the ceiling, but you get an everyday player with like Cody said, a real incentive to perform out there. And it probably won't be the most pretty baseball that you've ever watched in your life, but the numbers it is going to be a valuable guy to the team and would look a lot more valuable if some other right-handed infielder also signed as a free agent to the team. But maybe we'll talk about that a different time. So long day for Cody. Appreciate him popping on here. Appreciate everybody for listening, following us on X at Cody Stavenhagen, at Kieran_Steckley, at Tiger Territory _ Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast, YouTube, subscribe there so you get all the latest content from us. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I'm Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.